Yes, I am Lord Merlin. Who the hell are you? Can't you see I'm eating? Nothing to see here, kids. No pens. Could you stop looking at me? Seriously, this is annoying. Go and watch someone else eat or something. Bloody fountain pen users. Ballpoint pens all the bloody way. I fell into an ink bottle once. I looked like a paintbrush for weeks. And as if girls like guys with leaky pens too. Ridiculous. Are you still there? Get out! Out! I'm calling the cops, man. I'm serious. That's it. I'm getting the bazooka. Time for a fountain pen user shootout. You wanted to see Lord Merlin in action, well, now you've got it. I mean, that's all there's to it. So I'm not taking any responsibility, that's what you requested. Okay, now today I want to have a look at two pens in a shootout, and that's going to be the Cross Century 2 President and the Ohto F-Lapa. Now, why did I pick these two? Well, because when I unboxed the Cross, I immediately had to think of the Lapa. Now, I mean, just look at it, right? It's roughly the same size, the same shiny black barrel, the same smooth and thin body of the pen. It seemed to be a logical choice. So, a quick rundown of both pens. Well, the Cross was a bit more expensive, quite a bit actually, but it's the same size, right? So if you take a look at the two pens side by side, you see that they really are the same size. They also have roughly the same looks. You get black, then something colored trimmings, then some grip, and then again some colored trimmings. So the F-Lapa seems to be focusing on gold stuff, whereas the Cross is more silvery or chrome-like. But the size is the same, the grip sections are pretty much the same size, the nibs are pretty much the same size, the barrels have pretty much the same size, the same feel to them. One difference is that the F-Lapa is a bit lighter. It's aluminum. I'm not sure what material the Cross is, but it seems to be a bit heavier. That may have something to do with the cap, which is all metal and a bit bigger, but in all, they really have, apart from the weight, they have roughly the same feel, I would say. So what sets these two pens apart then? Well, the writing, and that's a very clear-cut thing with these pens. I think the Cross Century 2 is a lot smoother than the F-Lapa. The F-Lapa is not a bad pen, but it's not as smooth as this one. So I've shown you the two pens side by side, and I think it's best if I now show you how to disassemble them and how they write. And that's all there's to it. So I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay, so here we go with the Cross Century 2 President and the Ohto F-Lapa. I'll start with this one, actually. So here we have the F-Lapa. I can't disassemble an awful lot about this pen. You can take out the converter. I was unable to open this up. It looks like you could pull it apart, but I'm afraid I'll break it if I do that. It's a fairly cheap converter, but it works pretty well, actually, and very smoothly. Here we have the section. There's one thing I can do about that. There we go. This actually looks, I don't know whether you can see that, but it looks like this was glued in place. Now, when you open it up, look what happens. So try to make sure you don't misalign the feed and the nib. It's not really sensible to take this apart. There seems to be glue on there, so apparently it wasn't meant to be taken apart. But these hands will take it apart whether it was meant to be taken apart or not. You can screw it back in place. I was unable to remove the feed and the nib from the nib collar, so unscrewing it doesn't really help you an awful lot. But, you know, just for the sake of completion, what you can do. Now, with the Century 2, that's a whole different matter. You can take off the cap, unscrew the barrel, and then take the converter. Now, this is the most disassemblable converter I've ever seen, because it's useful to put this piston about halfway through, then you can just take this metal bit, unscrew it, remove the entire piston unit, take out the piston like that, and even this front part you can just pull off. So cleaning this is really easy. You just run through some water, either by just using a tap or using a bulb syringe. Then you push in a tissue, you roll it up, push it in there, and it is as clean as it was when it left the factory. So that's a very useful thing. If you're like me and you really enjoy cleaning pens, this is actually very useful, because it makes your life very easily. To put it back together, make sure there's this sort of notch here, so make sure you align that well, and push it in, screw the metal thing back in place, and you're done. Okay, now here we have the section and the feed and the nib. Well, carefully take hold of the nib and the feed. I've always found it's easiest if you just put the nib on your index finger and you gently squeeze the feed with your thumb. You can just pull it out, and there you go, the nib and the feed. So this is a pen that's very easy to clean because you can take it apart completely. Note, by the way, that with this pen, I'm not sure how well you can see that, but that the nib is actually pointed down, just ever so slightly. The tip goes down a bit. Perhaps it's easier to see if I put it on the feed. Can you see that? It's difficult to see, I guess, but it's pointed down slightly. Okay, well, I'll put this back together again, and I'll ink up the pens, and that's all there's to it. There's no specific way this goes in. It's all round, so you don't have to align anything, which is another useful thing. Make sure everything is pushed nicely back. There you go, seems to be just fine, yes. Now I have to take care because this feed is pretty wide, so you don't want that to touch the paper and have the nib not touch it, but this seems to be aligned well. Yep. Okay. Converter, and I'll leave the barrel off so that I can draw some ink. Right. The ink will be Waterman Florida blue. A very nice standard blue. Let's go with the President. And then the F-Lapa. Okay, let's do some writing. Okay, so here we go. We have the cross-century to President, and the Ohto F-Lapa. Just F-Lapa. So this is a fine nib. Being Asian, you might consider it to be extra fine, but I think this is actually a fairly regular fine nib, although it does actually give you a very thin line. Maybe it is extra fine. This is also a fine nib. Now, the first thing I notice when I'm using these two pens is that the nib on the cross is much smoother than that on the F-Lapa. Listen to this sound. Same amount of pressure. It's not a scratchy nib, but it is scratchier than this one. So side by side, here we have the F-Lapa, and here we have the cross. Yeah, this is definitely a lot smoother. It just feels a lot smoother. Now, one thing this nib does not really have is an awful lot of line variation. There is a little bit, but it's not extremely pronounced. You see that? Here I was touching the paper with the feed. Now with the F-Lapa, the amount of line variation is actually fairly impressive, I think. Whoops, sorry. For such a relatively inexpensive nib, if I try to replicate this, well, actually it's not so bad. It's a little flexier than I seem to remember it was. Okay, disregard that. Both nibs seem to give you about the same amount of line variation. Okay, some simple writing. Note that there is no skipping, no railroading. It's just very, well, railroading you wouldn't really expect with such a nib, but it's a very smooth nib, and it has no startup issues. Do you hear that this nib makes more noise than that one? It feels a bit scratchier. It's a bit, as I just told you, it's not exactly scratchy, but it is definitely not as smooth as this one. Oh, sorry about this. My camera moved. Yeah, it's at this, the upward strokes. That's where the scratch is most noticeable. Well, maybe I'll smooth it a bit more, whatever. In any case, so F-Lapa. Yeah, this one is definitely the smoothest. Okay, so when it comes to these two pens, this one was, the cross was quite a bit more expensive than the F-Lapa. What you get in return is, this is a very decent writing pen. You know, it's nothing spectacular, but it will get the job done. This is a more distinguished pen. It's a bit smoother. It's, well, yeah, it's definitely a bit heavier. There's probably a reason the President of the US uses this. It's simple and yet it's distinguished. It's a smooth writer. So, if you were to ask me now, which of these two should I choose? Well, it's up to you, of course. I think this one outperforms the F-Lapa. But it has a heavier price tag. So, if you're looking for a simple, smooth writer with a sort of thin build, this one will definitely get the job done. It's not a bad pen. This one's better, but you pay for that. So, I'll make you pay for that. No, that sounded weird, but you get what I mean. Alright, so I hope this was useful. I thank you for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.